What's going on, Sunbelt fans? Welcome into the Week 6 preview. I am Dominic Cressetto, and we will get right to business. Not a lot of games this week. All conference games, no out-of-conference slate at all. So we got some really interesting matchups because of that. Obviously, we know where some people stand a little bit better after last week, and this week will tell even more of the story as far as conference goes and the hierarchy of how that may finish out for us. We have the earliest game of the day at 2 o'clock Eastern Time kickoff on ESPN3. That pits Georgia Southern versus Georgia State down there in Atlanta. And these two teams, obviously from the name, or those of you not familiar, just getting into the conference, these two teams don't like each other much. And Georgia Southern has been the better program and the better tradition for a much longer period of time. So you would think that they dominate this matchup and the rivalry overall. Well, guess what? That's not the case. Georgia State leads this rivalry 5-3 all time. They've actually won the last 2 games as well. I guess last year not being much of a shock as Georgia Southern was down a little bit, but even the years where Georgia Southern's been favored, Georgia State has won this game more often than they have. So the question here is, can Georgia State stick with what started there at Army? And can Georgia Southern get back on the right path against Georgia State? I would say from what I saw against Army, Georgia State still has a ways to go. They could have won that game much more impressively than they did. Obviously, Army's going to slow that game down and run the clock, but Georgia Southern is not that type of team anymore. They're not a running one-dimensional team. They can throw or run. It doesn't matter. They've got good special teams. They've got a quality backfield. You can't play games with this team any longer. So it'll be interesting to see how this one goes. I'm going to favor Southern in this one just because of everything that they've done so far this year. Obviously, getting some wins that surprise people, and they've lost some games that are a little surprising too, I guess. But I think they're a much stronger team. And Georgia State, I thought, would be the stronger team going into this year, but they haven't proven that so far. This would go a long way to get there, but I don't see it just yet. I've got Georgia Southern 38, Georgia State 21 in this matchup. We'll see if that comes to fruition. This one could go the other way. It wouldn't shock me. But if I had to put money on it, my money is on Southern at this point in time. Next up, we've got a 7 o'clock kick on the NFL Network. James Madison against Arkansas State down there in Jonesboro. And this one could be the trap game that James Madison has been waiting to run into. But I'll go ahead and tell you that I'm not picking James Madison to get upset by Arkansas State. I will say that I am predicting a close game here. These two teams have never met on the football field, whether it be FCS or FBS. Obviously, FBS is the first year it could have happened. So this will be interesting. We know James Madison had a few turnovers last week, and against a team like Texas State, it didn't really matter much in the end. And it's also, it's a weather game. So a lot of those turnovers really didn't concern me. Obviously, I'm not a James Madison fan, so as an outsider, it didn't concern me. And then Texas State, stumbling over themselves there a little bit too, so couldn't do much with those turnovers. So I still favor James Madison in this one. I think they're still going to keep on their winning ways. They are favored by 11.5 points. I don't have them winning by quite that much. So I have Arkansas State covering. I think the fact that they're going to go on the road and possibly, again, are they going to have a little bit of a letdown, some tail shore up some things, and, the weather not being a factor this time around, is it going to be a little bit better? But Arkansas State's defense is going to be better than what Texas State showed. And I think Arkansas State's offense can be a little bit more two-dimensional, with Blackman being a little bit of a scrambler at times when he needs to be. Hatcher did not present that at all whatsoever last week and hasn't at all this year. And then App State didn't really do that for James Madison either. So this may be one of the first scrambling-type quarterbacks that their defense has to go up against. So that could be a good test for them. I'm going to favor James Madison, though. I'm going to go 34, Arkansas State 28. Game after that, well, at the same time, we got 2 more games at 7 o'clock kickoffs Eastern time. We will go with the Southern Miss versus Troy game first, 7 o'clock ESPN+. Troy favored by 6.5 at this point in time. I'm going to favor Troy in this one too. I think they were my pick before the year started to win the West. And early on, it didn't look like a great pick, honestly. Out of conference slate, you're just like, I don't know if this team's got it. They were supposed to have this great defense, and they haven't been keeping some people off the board. Well, that Ole Miss game is not a good one to look at. Ole Miss has been very good so far as well, so it's hard to take that one into consideration. And then, how they performed against App and then beating Western Kentucky. I mean, they've shut down some impressive offenses. Their defense has really turned a corner. Carlton Martial's healthy and back on the field and just dominating like he always has, even though he's been a little undersized his whole career. It seems like doesn't matter. The guy just gets it done. I think that they will be able to continue to get it done against the Southern Miss offense that is starting to click certainly a little bit more. But I just don't think they're going to overpower that Troy defensive front. I really don't see that happening. So if they can make the pass game happen, they should keep it relatively close. And, Gore could, definitely help keep control of that clock by running it. So I do think they have enough of a two-dimensional game at Southern Miss that could make things a little bit interesting there. So I'm going to favor Troy in this one, though, 27, and Southern Miss 21. That last kick at 7 o'clock, ESPN Plus pits Appalachian State versus Texas State. This one, all-time, is App State 6 victories, Texas State 0. With how Texas State has performed so far this year, I don't see this changing. However, App State, that's a long travel for App State to get down there, and they've had some decently close games in the past. They've had some blowouts as well against Texas State, but it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out. Do they have some false sense of security and confidence after destroying Citadel last week? Maybe. The Citadel is a very one-dimensional team and a poor one-dimensional team at that. They couldn't even run the ball when that's all they've really got. Texas State can't really run the ball either, so that should be similar. However, App State's defenses look pretty porous against that passing attack this year, and Texas State does have some of that on their side. So I'm calling this one closer than a lot of people will. The line is 19 points in favor of App State. I don't see them meeting or beating that. I could be wrong, but I'm going to call this one in favor of App State 33 to Texas State's 26. And then the latest kick of the night, the nightcap, 8 o'clock, ESPN Plus pits Coastal Carolina against Louisiana Monroe. This one is interesting. The all-time record is Monroe 3 victories, Coastal Carolina 1. So that's a little shocking for some people to probably hear with how ULM has been over the past several years and how Coastal has been over the last several. And we do have to note, though, that they did play last year and Coastal won that one 59-6. So it's not necessarily the all-time series that matters as much in this one. I would lean more towards what happened last year. But I think ULM is better offensively than they have been in the past several years. They're not going to blow anybody away and shock a bunch of people, but they're still pretty consistent overall when you really look down at it and look at those numbers. They're not all over the board. They've been pretty consistent with putting up around that 20-ish point mark throughout much of the season. But Coastal's also been consistent with the offense as well, and they've been putting up 30-plus points. So I'm going to favor those numbers, honestly, in this one, and say Coastal takes this one 32-24. Could be a little bit more of a blowout than that. It wouldn't really shock me in that regard. But, this is, again, for Coastal, this is a decent travel, just like for the App State-Texas State game. These other conference games, not so far as distance is concerned. And so I think we've got an interesting slate of games. I think we're going to see where people sit a little bit better after this week. If you've got one that you've got to point out to as a must-watch, I'm going to put that as the Georgia Southern versus Georgia State game, just because of the hatred kind of involved in that. You got to check that one out. That's obviously going to be that first game of the day, so it might be a nice one to check in on and see if it's living up to expectations. So hopefully everyone has a good time. You can start your day out slow on a Saturday, maybe watch some College Game Day before all this stuff gets rolling, get some stuff done, and then enjoy the night of football as far as the Sun Belt Conference goes. So thanks for listening, downloading, and we will see you next time.